Hello. So just for purposes of, I wanted to say this is actually the first video I recorded after I got my haircut, but it's going to be going up a ways after a bunch of the other ones with me having short hair go up, because this won't be going up until sometime in 2023, in like January, highly doubt February, but January most likely of 2023 is when this video is going to go up. Which means that I'm talking about Digimon. Digimon Tamers to be specifically. So I have talked all about the different tamers themselves, so all of the kids and their Digimon and such, all the ones that have Digimon partners and such. Now I'm going to start talking about a bunch of the different allies that they have throughout the course of the series. And then I'll do their families, which I mean kind of qualify as allies, but they're families. And then I'll start working on some of the other ones in regards to the different Digimon that they encounter throughout the course of the series. I'll also be doing a video specifically about how the different modify cards tend to work in the series, and about how some of the other, like how that digital world came into being, and some other bits. And some other bits here and there that go along with it. But this video, as the thumbnail and the title says, is actually about Calumon. And Calumon actually serves as the physical incarnation of Digivolution. Oh, the dog's coming. Hey, baby. You want to come in here and be in the video? Come on. There we go. We have Rainy. We have the Rainy. He's like, why is the window closed and covered? He actually got his haircut the same day I did, so yeah. So he's slightly less fluffy right now. So Calumon is the physical incarnation of Digivolution in the Tamers universe. Is also referred to as the Catalyst. Is also referred to as the Digi-Intellichi. I don't remember how to. I can't pronounce it. It's not. They don't ever use it in the English one, so I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. And Calumon is this very free-spirited, very childlike wonder of things. Very cute. And throughout the course of the series, we actually kind of see Calumon grow as a character and learn more about themselves, about himself. In the English dub, they refer to him as a he. Multiple times. Kind of the story that we get with Calumon is that Calumon is actually kind of one of the first characters we're introduced to in the series, if I remember correctly. In the first episode, we see Calumon running around in like this digital plane area, and is being chased by this very large other Digimon that's trying to destroy it, and then Calumon ends up getting, you know, sent into the real world. And once Calumon lands in the real world, he starts being very fascinated by so many things in the real world, by humans, by foods, particularly, you know, sweet rolls and different things like that, because he loves pastry and sugar in general. Very fascinated, particularly by kids and stuff, and things along those lines. And Calumon, for the first couple of episodes, is kind of just there in the background, as we're like introduced to Takato and Henry and Rika and their Digimon and such. And then one day, when Calumon is rummaging around in the school, because Calumon finds his way to the school and likes to cause chaos in the school. Like, they didn't have enough trouble with Gilmon breaking in and then eating all of the food and scaring the principal, which I still find hilarious. But Calumon breaks into the school and kind of ends up, is like rummaging around in the nurse's office one day and like scares Jerry. And then there's other instances throughout the course of the first part where like Calumon is like loves watching the kids play soccer and like wants to play soccer with the kids. Or likes to cause a lot of mischief and like makes his way into like the shed where they keep all the tools for the soccer stuff, and ends up like stealing the thing that they use to make all the chalk outlines, ends up stealing that, and like, you know, running that around and like this is my own, way of playing the game, and if you cross this line, you have to, hop on your leg and like all this other random stuff because Calumon is actually quite random, um, to a degree. And at one point, Takato ends up finding Calumon when he's at the school with Gilmon. They find Calumon, and Calumon doesn't seem like he's harmed anyone or anything along those lines, but Takato and Henry actually kind of try to think about trying to find Calumon a tamer. And, they're like, well, having a tamer might be good for him. It might make him calm down a little bit and cause less problems around the school and around town. And during this time frame, they kind of think of, well, we could have Susie, as in Henry's sister, be the tamer, but they like picture that and it just doesn't go well for Calumon. He gets dressed up so much and is not well. And then it's just like, well, we could have Kazu be his tamer, and it's just like, no, Kazu would be like way too rough on the little guy. Which, I mean, Kazu in the end isn't like rough on like Gardramon or anything, but it's still like, maybe not the right fit for him and Calumon and such. So they're just like, well, maybe that wouldn't work, maybe that would work. And they just kind of like, maybe not, maybe Calumon doesn't need a tamer. And at one point, Calumon convinces Gilmon to help him break into, the shed where they have all the supplies, because they put a lock on it this time, and they break in and they, start, messing with all the supplies again, and they draw more stuff, more chalk outlines all over, the soccer field or whatever. And that actually makes a digital field develop, because Calumon has this like triangle-ish, layered triangle symbol on his head. And I think that Gilmon also has like some of those similar, not exactly the same, but similar symbols all over him. But they end up drawing like the part of the design looks like Calumon's symbol that's on his head. And in that time frame, what ends up happening is Calumon, that makes a digital field appear, and then they have to fight whatever popped up in the digital field. And throughout the course of the first part of the series, Takato actually kind of ends up noticing that like every time that Gilmon or Terriermon or Renamon digivolve, Calumon seems to be involved. And it's like, for the first couple of times, like Calumon's not near them when it happens, but then Takato starts to notice that because Calumon is like hanging out with them. And he starts seeing, the triangle thing on Calumon's head glow whenever one of the Digimon digivolve. Particularly when they digivolve to their ultimate form. And Takato ends up asking Calumon, and it was just like, are you part of a reason that they can digivolve? Could they digivolve without you? And like Calumon takes this the wrong way. Calumon thinks that Takato doesn't want him around anymore. And it's just like, no, that's not the case. No, you're fine. I really like having you around. But Calumon kind of, mishears that. And we have moments where we see like Calumon like gets picked on a lot by Impmon throughout that course of the series and such. Calls him Cream Puff a whole lot. I don't know if that's just in the American dub, but they call him Cream Puff a lot. And, Calumon loves cream puffs. And throughout the course of, the series, we see, Calumon ends up having like interactions with like Rika, and Rika doesn't really want anything to do with Calumon because it's just like, oh god, it's cute and I don't like cute. And like Rika's going through the phase where she doesn't see the point in Digimon if they can't fight, is where she's kind of going through that phase at the time. And then during the time frame when Rika is actually kind of like trying to give up on being a tamer after certain things happen with like Ice Devimon, what ends up happening is Calumon ends up actually going to Rika's house, like one of the nights when like something's happening with like Renamon. And because like Rika has like thrown away her cards and her Digivice, and Calumon goes and like actually pulls the Digivice and the cards out of the trash can and like leaves them next to Rika's bed. And it was just like, I think you're going to need these, or, why did you get rid of these, or that type of thing. Because, like, Calumon can tell that Rika's going through something, and that that Rika actually really cares for Renamon, but Rika is not very good at showing her emotions, as I went over several times in the Rika video. And, so we see a lot of that stuff happen throughout the course of the series, throughout the course of the first part of the series. Calumon is there, and actually whenever any of them digivolve into their ultimate forms, we actually see a representation of Calumon appear in the Digivolution. A reflection of Calumon appears when they're digivolving. And I'm going to do a whole separate video about how Digivolution seems to work in this world. But Calumon is very much a part of this. And, like, the Tamers haven't figured this out yet. Takado kind of has, like, an inkling that maybe Calumon has something to do with it, but isn't really, isn't 100% sure. And then one of the things that ends up happening is when they're on, during the first movie, the Digimon Battle of Adventure, Calumon actually ends up traveling with Takado to, like, on his little vacation. Calumon travels with him and, like, causes, some trouble on the plane and everything, but not too much. And then is, like, kind of there throughout the first part, meets Takado's, cousin and the grandpa, and meets Minami and such. And then Calumon actually ends up kind of getting teleported to a degree back to where Rika was, who's currently, like, in main part of Japan, not where Takado is. And then Calumon is, like, there during the final battle against Mephistomon, digivolved into Golfmon, and is kind of lends his power in order for all of them to, digivolve to their ultimate form, so they can, do the Trinity Burst and then defeat Golfmon. And then, Calumon's just, there and happy after the fight. So Calumon's kind of there for that. And then, we have this episode where one of the episodes is Jerry, of course, wants to become a tamer. And Jerry kind of looks at Calumon, and she's just like, well, why don't I become your tamer and you be my Digimon? We'll be partners. And Calumon's like, can we say no? Because Calumon is definitely not, like, a fighting Digimon. But, like, Jerry kind of tries to convince him that it'll be really fun and everything. And, Calumon's not going for it. And then they get attacked by the mouse Deva. I cannot remember the rat Deva, whatever. I can't remember his name. Aren't you so cute? Rainy, yes, I'm cute and I match the bedding. Well, you would match the bedding more if you had flowers on you. Rainy, nope. And what ends up happening is they're attacked by the mouse Deva, rat Deva. And that's when Leomon appears, and of course Jerry goes all goo-goo-eyed for, Leomon, and Calumon's just kind of like, okay, I think she's broken. As she's, like, watching the way that Jerry's looking at Leomon. It, like, actually kind of helps Jerry chase Leomon around. So it's just like, yeah, no, Jerry didn't get Calumon as her partner. Of course, we know that Jerry ended up getting Leomon, and then lost him. But shortly after that is when they have the big battle with Vicaramon, with the giant boar Deva. And during that time frame is when Makuramon, who is the monkey Deva, ends up actually taking Calumon away from Jerry and Kazu and Kenta, who were kind of protecting him at the time. Because they kind of figured out that that Calumon was in danger, and Calumon had also been quite weakened because, like, all three of the Takado, Rika, and Henry had all, digivolved their Digimon up to their ultimate forms and were using them to fight Vicaramon. So we kind of see that, Calumon's kind of exhausted in that regard. And what ends up happening is, Makuramon kidnaps, Calumon from right in front of them, like, literally grabs Calumon right out of Jerry's hands because he's really fast, and I'll give him that. And he heads off to the digital world, and, like, at some point Calumon ends up in a cage, and, when he's trying to, like, take him into the digital world, and then Calumon actually ends up kind of getting separated from Macuromon because like the cage gets stuck in one of the digital barriers from the human world and the digital world. And during this time frame is when like Takato and the others are like, okay, well, we have to go to the digital world and we have to save Calumon, so that's what they're off doing. And Calumon ends up getting Macuromon. The cage gets stuck, and then Macuromon has to go and get help. Because he apparently can't figure out how to pull a cage out of a digital field. And then Calumon kind of gets like left behind, and then ends up, because like a bunch of the Diginomes show up. I'll do a video on the Diginomes too. The Diginomes show up and actually end up like kind of freeing Calumon from the cage because they grant his wish to be freed from the cage. And he, escapes from the cage, and he ends up in the digital world. And then at some point, he actually ends up finding where the Tamers had left their flag as like, like a marking a meeting spot. And Calumon, ends up getting the flag, and he ends up like, he had been trying to figure out like, well, if I can take this flag around, then I can show everyone my friends, and then I can ask them if they've seen them. And a decent idea, I'll give you that, Calumon, but it doesn't work super well because like the flag's too heavy, and then the flag gets blown over and kind of ripped, and Calumon kind of ends up wearing like the top part of the flag is like a little cape, which is adorable, and like runs around with like the cape on, and like ends up interacting with like a couple of different Digimon. And at one point while Calumon's running around, because like he's kind of like chasing the different Diginomes, because he's like I'm like, he's not feeling very happy at the time. And he's like chasing the Diginomes, and he ends up, as he's running around, he ends up like drawing, the triangle symbol in the dirt of the digital world. And there's a bunch of Woodmon, or these like tree type Digimon around, and like they're kind of watching him, and like as Calumon's running around, he's like singing a very funny song that I kind of wish I'd put in here as a quote, but I'm just like, I'm not singing the song, and it's hard to do that with a straight face, and I don't think I'd be able to get through the whole thing with a straight face without having to do so many takes, because it is really funny, because it's just like Calumon nonsense, and it's adorable. You can find it, it's really easy to find. And as Calumon's running around, the Woodmon are just like, I think he's lost it. And then they end up actually digivolving into Cherrymon, which is like the I don't know if that's the ultimate form or the mega form, but they end up digivolving all the way up to Cherrymon. And that's been affected by Calumon's power. And then at one point, like Calumon gets reunited with Rika, ends up finding Rika, and they get reunited because Calumon actually ends up like saving Rika from like a rushing stream or whatever, a rushing river. And then, of course, like, they're just really happy to find Calumon, and then they end up making their way back to where Takato and the rest of the group are. So it's just like, okay, everybody's almost all back together, and then, of course, stuff happens. And in that time frame is when Macuromon shows up again, and he, gets, captures Calumon again, and then puts him into an even, tighter cage, and ends up taking him to the land of the Sovereign, where we actually end up getting this monologue.
Deep in the land of the 4 Digimon Sovereign, there was once a shining light. This light gave Digimon the ability to digivolve, to become greater and more powerful than ever before. Then one day, that light disappeared. Until...
And kind of like that monologue kind of confirms that this is what Calumon was. Calumon was this embodiment of the power of Digivolution, and Calumon kind of gets put into like this pretty gilded cage. I would definitely say it's a very apt description for this place where Calumon is put, which is in this like kind of the center of like where all 4 of the Sovereign realms meet. It like goes into this like, I don't know, middle area between them, and it ends up there, and they end up during that time frame is when some other things happen. That's when Takato and Henry are separated, and when Susie arrives. And then when they end up, making their way into, having to deal with, Bialzamon, and they all get their, Takato and Henry both get their mega evolutions with Gallantmon and Mega Gargomon. And during that time frame, Calumon has actually started to like crawl his way out of, this giant pit gilded cage thing that they put him in. And he like was like crawling is what kids got determination. I'll give him that. like crawling his way out, up out of the pit. And this is where we start to see like these little blobs of the D Reaper start to show up. And, they keep, floating by Calumon. And Calumon's like, yeah, no, I don't want those things to touch me. I don't know what they are, but I don't think them touching me is a good idea. And during this time frame is when we get kind of an explanation from Zulongmon about what Calumon is. And Zulongmon ends up explaining that he, in order to kind of help protect this power of Digivolution from this true enemy of the D Reaper, he, transformed Calumon, or transformed this power of the Digivolution into a Digimon, and then sent it into the human world. Calumon did not agree with this, and that's why he sent a bunch of the Devas into the human world, A, to cause chaos, and B, to find the catalyst. That's what Makuramon specifically, I'm guessing, was there to do. Was to find the catalyst and then bring Calumon back to the digital world. Because Calumon, of course, thought that he could use, the catalyst to, like, force Calumon to make the other Digimon digivolve so they could use him against the D Reaper, which... desperate times, desperate measures, but you could have just asked. And during that time frame is when Rika and Renamon go into the pit, and go further into the pit, and they find Calumon. So it's like another happy reunion. And I kind of like that they have, like, Rika and Calumon kind of have that little bond and everything, because, like, initially Rika wanted nothing to do with Calumon and everything, and, Takato and Henry were at least pretty, okay with having Calumon around and such. So I like that they show that. That also just shows Rika's growth as a character. And, Calumon had wanted to try, at one point Calumon even trying to, like, defend himself, wanted to, like, have an attack or something like that. I think we even see, like, Calumon headbutt someone at some point, or attempt to headbutt someone. It doesn't do much damage, or any. And what ends up happening is, Calumon's there when Rika and Renamon, digivolve into Sakuyamon and everything, and they get Calumon out of the pit and everything, and, like, Calumon's, like, really happy to see everyone, and, like, all the Digimon are just like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. I mostly thought about cream puffs the entire time. And it's just like, yes, Calumon, of course you did. I guess if you really love cream puffs, they're a really good motivator to get out of the pit that you've been thrown into. And what ends up happening is, during, they get to, like, a more safer area, and then that's when Zulongmon actually kind of explains to Calumon a little bit more of what he is, and, you're the catalyst, you're this focal point for Digivolution. And, he, like, asks Calumon for his help in having to deal with the D Reaper, to help, help the other Digimon be able to digivolve all the way up to Mega, so that way they can fight against the D Reaper. So we see that, and of course Calumon agrees, because Calumon is very sweet. And even though, Chuchalmon technically had well, there's no technically about it. Chuchalmon outright had Calumon kidnapped, against his will. Zulongmon asked very nicely, and, like, the other two sovereigns, the turtle and the tiger, are also, like, very polite to Calumon and everything. And I think Chuchalmon has somewhat apologized at this point in time. I don't remember exactly, but maybe a little bit apologized. And what ends up happening is, Calumon agrees to help them, and that's when he uses, we see him, like, kind of looking through, like, this moment where we have him, surrounded by all four sovereigns, and, like, everybody's watching, and it's, like, one of Calumon's big moments in the series. And Calumon ends up, finding the power that's inside of him and activating his attack that's called Shining Digivolution. And a bunch of the Diginomes show up, and they actually help with, granting the wish. They help with, like, spreading his power throughout the digital world, and we see this kind of this visage of, like, I guess more of a visage of Calumon's power show up. And, like, the power spreads throughout the digital world, and we see lots of other, we see several Digimon digivolve into their mega forms and then come toward them, come to where the light was so they can help battle against the D Reaper. We see other mega digivolutions show up, mega Digimon show up, to help, and like that's when Marine Angemon shows up and such, and like ends up finding Kenta and such, and like so we see a bunch of that happen. And Calumon gets pretty tired after that, understandably so. But they're all just like, he was really good, and he did, he was, really good, and he accomplished his mission. So they're all just like, they're all really happy and everything. And that's when Azulimon's, it's like, I will send you back to the real world, or I'll give you, I'll send you back to where you were when you first arrived here, so you can get back to the real world. And he does that. And Calumon doesn't really do too much for those couple of episodes. We kind of see him trying to like cheer up Jerry, who's kind of not Jerry at this point in time, because this is when Jerry has been replaced by the D Reaper agent. And like they get back to the real world. And Jerry ends up going with Takato, or Calumon ends up going with Takato and Gilmon and Jerry when they're taking Jerry back to where her parents are staying. And it was kind of like there for that, and like is kind of like we see Calumon kind of goes with Jerry, or the fake Jerry, to where her parents are staying, and kind of plays with her brother and everything, and like plays with Jerry's brother and such, and ends up actually kind of seeing that Jerry is not normal, or is not the way that she's supposed to be. And and then Jerry just kind of up and vanishes. And Calumon somehow finds his way back to like the main city where most of the series takes place. Finds his way back there, and ends up running into Impmon. And Calumon explains that he can sense Jerry inside the D Reaper, can sense Jerry's presence within the D Reaper. And Beelzemon ends up, digivolving all the way up to Beelzemon Blast Mode and everything, and is able to like help Calumon get to where he's sensing Jerry, which starts off as giant invisible orb that requires punching, and then they get inside of it, and Calumon is able to get to where Jerry is. And Jerry is of course kind of in her little bit of her like very catatonic, very not paying attention to any form of state, because she's in her very depressive state at this point in time. And what ends up happening is, Calumon kind of tries to like cheer Jerry up, but that doesn't do too much. And then of course Calumon is there when Beelzemon is almost able to save Jerry, because he's like rooting for Beelzemon at one point. It's like, hit it again, harder. In regards to, I don't remember what exactly Beelzemon hit. I think he's like trying to hit part of the D Reaper's core to like try to get to where Jerry is. I don't remember exactly. But Calumon's kind of there as Beelzemon is almost able to save Jerry. And then Calumon ends up being trapped inside of the orb with Jerry when like the D Reaper like evolves again. And when Jerry is still being held hostage and everything. And we get this, and I went over this moment in the Jerry video, but I'm going to go over it again here in the Calumon video because it's important to both characters. When Jerry is, when she's all wrapped in like the cord vines, whatever you want to call them, that are inside the D Reaper core, and such, Calumon ends up actually trying to, and like Jerry's talking to her little puppet, and the puppet's, being like kind of, the bad voice, saying the bad things and everything. Calumon, rips the puppet off of Jerry's hand, and like throws it away. It's just like, don't listen to the rag, don't do that. You're not, being alone isn't good. Being on your own is not good for you, and such like that. And it's like trying to like make Jerry stop having the negative thoughts. And of course, throughout that course, that's when the Tamers are trying to get to where Jerry is and get to where Calumon is and everything, and the big battle is happening, and Jerry of course does her big monologue against the D Reaper and everything, and it's like has Calumon with her when they're actually able to get free of the D Reaper core, and Calumon actually uses some form of his power to like actually like protect Jerry in like this kind of I don't know exactly. It's like a glowing green light that like protects Jerry against the D Reaper at the time. And ends up, and that's when like Takato and Gilmon show up and everything, and they're able to get to Jerry and get to Calumon, and they're all able to get out of the D Reaper. And they're the D Reaper is de-digivolved itself, brought back to its original code and somewhat destroyed. And what ends up happening is, they're all, everybody's happy, and then all the Digimon start glowing and shrinking, and your heart is in your hand at that point in time. It's just like, no, I don't want to say goodbye to them. And, Jerry's the one that gets to say goodbye to Calumon, so, Calumon and the others all float back to the digital world and such. And then, of course, at the end of the series, we kind of know that, the Digimon have to, find a way back to the human world. And then we go into the Digimon Runaway Locomon movie, the second one for the Tamers. And that one, we see Calumon a tiny little bit at the beginning. Like, Calumon's with Jerry and Rika's grandma working on trying to, like, get the cake ready and get everything ready for, like, Rika's birthday party and such. And, Calumon kind of becomes, like, a second partner to Jerry a little bit. It seems to be around Jerry a lot more. Then he, after losing Leomon, that's kind of like what Calumon kind of does. And, what ends up happening is, throughout the, that part of the movie, Calumon's not very much involved. We see Calumon again at the end of the movie at Rika's party and, having fun and everything with all the Tamers and everything. And, we end up, so, that's just like this fun bit that we get with Calumon. I like how they kind of did that with Calumon as a character, because it's a different way of looking at Digivolution. Because kind of the way that they hint at it in the series is that because Azulamon had sent Calumon into the real world, that Digimon that were within the digital world really couldn't digivolve anymore. Except for those that were connected to the sovereigns. So, like, the Devas, like, they had kind of been given power from the sovereigns, and, like, that's where Itmon's power to digivolve into Beelzemon came from, was, it was a gift from the sovereigns. And I'll go more into that when I talk about the Digivolution in general, which I might pair with this video. We'll see. But, yeah, I like how they kind of did that with Calumon, because it's just a different way of looking at Digivolution. Throughout the course of, the different Digimon series and stuff like that. It gives you, like, a different perspective of, like, how that would work. So that's what we have for Calumon. The next character discussion video will be about, well, it's going to be about Yamaki. And then I'll do one that's about Riley and Tali, who are, like, his two, like, assistants. And then I'll do one that's about Hypnos specifically. And then I'll do other ones about, like, the Monster Makers and Henry's dad. And then, like, the families and such before I get into some of the other things. And I might throw in some of the other, like, digital world concepts in that range. So that's what I have for this. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments about Calumon, please comment them. I think he's adorable, and I would love a stuffed version of him. He looks very squishy. And you got to see the dog. So, Rainy, who is awesome. And nope, not asleep. He's like, well, you said my name, so I is awake. Okay. Bye.